Hi everybody, welcome to Module 7, the last week of new content. It was a beautiful weekend. I hope you got a chance to enjoy it before or after you were working on your assignments. So this week we look at two topics, organizational change and organizational culture. As I note here, these are my two of my favorite topics. I've taught an entire course on organizational change. Which I haven't had the opportunity to do here at the Citadel yet, but maybe I will in the future. And then organizational culture is an important part of organizations. You can't necessarily see and understand it when you're part of the organization, but if you come in as an outsider, you can usually identify some of the core components. So this week you'll do a discussion board as usual, an individual assignment, and then your journal assignment this week is to reflect on the overall concept of servant leadership. So there's a website that you can look at, there's some articles, there's a video, and you may be familiar with it already from your own experience. So first is the discussion board, and here I'm going to ask you to try to describe the artifacts and then identify the underlying assumptions and values that are part of that organization. So the visual here tries to show you what's above the water we can see are the physical structures, the language, rituals, stories. Underneath the culture is really what we want to know about, which are the shared values and assumptions. So I'll ask you to identify and describe an organization, and then describe some of the artifacts and the shared values and assumptions that are part of that culture. An example here is an old David Letterman clip that talks about organizational culture differences when GE purchased NBC. Of course, it's an exaggeration, but it still points out some of the values and the physical artifacts. The individual written assignment is to look at change, organizational change, and to complete a force field analysis. So identify a change that you would like to implement. See implemented somewhere. Put this in the goal section. I have a document here. Sometimes it's hard to use it because the formatting moves around, so you don't have to use that. But just you could write out what is the change, what are the driving forces, what are those forces that are pushing for the change, and the restraining forces, what are those forces or groups or issues that move against the change, push against the change. 3, think about how you would shift the equilibrium. Who will resist and why, and how will you handle the resistance? So lots of change going on in organizations today. Sometimes we have control over it, sometimes we don't, but there's always going to be resistance just because something's different. And then finally, the journal on servant leadership, serving others before self. So first, I'm going to ask you, are you a servant leader? So identify 3 of the previous characteristics of principled leadership that you wrote about in your journal, and provide examples and other evidence that you've demonstrated these. Reflect, have you worked for a servant leader or with one? What was that like? And would you like to become more of a servant leader? Why or why not? You know, there might be situations when you don't feel that's appropriate. So that's it for this week. Our final week will be a final paper where you analyze yourself and what you've learned. So have a great week.